All right, everybody. Welcome, everybody. Tonight is December 14th, 2021. This is the Evansville School District Finance Committee meeting, and I will call the meeting to order. Before we get started, I want to acknowledge first, it's a pleasure to be able to continue to serve as the chair of the Finance Committee for the next year. And we welcome back Mike Henderson. We also have two new members, Chief Bishop and welcome to the committee. We have two presentations tonight. Before we get into the business, as we have for the last several months, we have one during our storm damage insurance update and another for the food service bid. Is there any introduction to give for them?
I'll just again thank our folks from ICS and Utica for being here tonight. So Bill, I think are going to do the majority of presenting tonight from ICS, and then certainly if there's any questions specifically insurance related, traffic and coming up for us. So I'll introduce Bill and Noel again to the committee to help them share their presentation.
Sure. And while they're coming up, just a reminder to everybody, board administration and anyone speaking at the mic up there, these mics you really do have to have kind of right in front of your face to get good sound. So please don't be shy. Go ahead and you've got a mask.
So I apologize. I do want to stand near here because there's a little bit of a cramp on here that I want to point to as we move through. So I'm sorry, I'm Phil Solomon from ICS. Here to give you a quick update on what's happening in Washington, obviously, as well as some current areas. So just quick, we want to do action to date, what our preliminary occupancy plan is, talk a little bit about what the township's going to require for the occupancy, and then next steps. And then obviously, interrupt us anytime for questions or comments. If you could just go to the next. So just some action to date. I mean, obviously the district hired us to appeal on 11/4. Literally that day we were on site with our hygienist. By 11/8 we had turned around for the report. We had modified some of the demolition plan as well as some of the scope that was going to be needed to reopen the building. Since then we've been meeting 3 times a week with administration, contractors, insurance, all the different people that's going to take put the building back together. Recently, we've been directing contractors to get the building ready for occupancy, and we are also working with the township. So, let me get to the next slide. I think this is where the rubber meets the road, and I'm sorry, I know you're probably not going to be able to see this, but I'm going to kind of point and walk you through.
So just as a reminder, sorry to interrupt, for everyone, you do have this presentation attached to the agenda. You can make it nice and big on the screen in front of you if you can't see it.
Yeah, sorry, it's a little hard to see, but I'll just kind of walk it through everything. So, yeah, when we first started, what we wanted to do was kind of segment the building into the heavily damaged areas, medium, and light. And what you're seeing here in red is that is the heavily damaged area. Obviously, that's where the roof was ripped off, a lot of the water damage. It's got major damage to that area, going to need a lot of reconstruction. This is kind of that 2-story section of the building. This right-hand side is kind of medium damaged, if you will. There was some water damage, things had to be demoed, and it is going to take some reconstruction to get that open, but not nearly the extent on that area. Then you have this front section, we just call that light damage. That was stuff that could be, picked up readily and did not need a lot of long lead items to get the building back open. So the plan is to get all of the green area ready for occupancy in the January-February time. I say January-February because there's a couple of outstanding things we'll talk about that need to happen before we can open those segments. When you move to the heavily damaged area, we don't have a schedule on that yet. We need to work through that a little bit more with some general contractors so that we can get a list of long lead items. I'm sure many of you have already heard, there's supply chain issues, some things that used to be able to get, 10 weeks, could be 20 weeks, could be 30 weeks. So those things are going to be kind of the limiting factor of getting that done. What we're thinking of doing is, once we get an idea of the materials, we would bring to the board maybe some substitutions that could help expedite the opening. So we're working through this, but it's just not ready to have a date on it just yet. So a few things to think about here. So there's kind of three things I put here: the clean, clarity issues, and code. So everything in red obviously is going to be covered by a plan. And what that's going to leave you though is just going to leave you an area at the end that's finished pretty much good. You will then still have all this section that's older. So, at some point when we have more data, we'll probably bring to the board a decision to be made of, would you like to update that section to make the whole building the same? Or do you want to put that off to another building? Now, in addition, there's also some HVAC damage. And we spoke about last time that, you could build the building back how it was or how it should be. Because we have looked at the feasibility study, we have a lot of recommendations for HVAC. Obviously, when you're doing major work, it would behoove you to think about doing other work at the same time. That would make sense. The other piece is the code issues, and some of this is going to be covered by claim, and some of it will be a decision for the district to make. Anything in this section that needs to be brought up to code will be paid for by the claim. There are other areas in the building that still need to be brought up to code at some point, and you may want to do as part of this project. Examples will be bathrooms that could be updated to ADA compliance. And there's another section of this LGI work which functionally is not fantastic. So that we'll let you know that. And there may be an opportunity to reconfigure that to something that's more usable. So just kind of a big map. If you go to the next one, I'll show you the bottom floor. So this is the upper level. And then this is the lower level. So this basically the other side. And what we're going to do is segment the building with specialty buildings. They're called demising walls to segment the occupied area from the unoccupied area. Can you go back to the previous slide? So I just wanted to stop here for a second and just see if we can answer any questions or if there's anything that you need clarification on before we get to the next steps.
I just want to make the point that as Phil is talking about the areas of the building that were damaged, when we start to move grade levels back, the building will not be configured moving forward the way it was configured before. So, the most damaged part of the building was the first and second grade hallway. That hallway most likely will not house grades 1 and 2 moving forward. So when we're ready to lay out our plan to transition grade levels back, we'll be also letting the community know the configuration of the building.
Any members of the committee have questions for Phil at this point? Anna?
Not a question, but just a request, because I agree you make some good points about, maybe it's a good time to bring certain things up to code, but I think maybe it's stating the obvious, but an important piece for us to know is to what extent, if at all, is that going to extend the timeline for opening? Of course, cost as well, but I think the timeline is critical for lots of people. So if you can just kind of bake that in when that information comes in, that would be great.
Yeah, and I actually didn't like knowing it that way. So HVAC and everything else, you have the opportunity to bring it, to bring it to what it should be, but it cannot delay occupancy. So one of the things we had thought about is if you were to do it that way, the only way to really get the rest of it in line with the construction pieces going on is through what's called the design build process. So that is a very good process that can marry together kind of a fluid situation quickly. Your traditional design bid build, like the way you're building the middle school, you could never do that in an integrated fashion. So that's kind of a recommendation, an early recommendation. And when we have more information about the numbers and have a real decision for you to make, we'll bring all that to the administration and bring that to you as well. DQ.
Yeah, so if we look at this now, we're looking at the front of the building as being accessible, right? And then the back, the part of the back only on the side of the, well, towards the high school, right? And that leaves out the library, and then that whole wing, that is closer to, Fort Washington Avenue.
Exactly.
I don't know what is it, Highland Avenue, I'm sorry. So you are comfortable with operating the building with that partition in there in a way that is safe and is heatable, but also doesn't have noise from one side to the other. That's all. You can partition it off.
Yeah, those are the best spots that we can partition. So it's this hallway will not be accessible to students. We will install a wall here. Now I can't guarantee that there'll be no sound that's going to come through the wall. I mean, there will eventually
No, but
instruction.
within reason. I mean, teachers can and students can operate a normal schedule in those segmented areas.
Yes, and we actually have another slide that's going to be all the things that we need to do to make this an occupied area. And it's not just what we need to do, but it's what the township needs to sign off on. So that's going to be the next section that we talk about. But yeah, we believe this to be a safe plan. It segments the occupied areas with students from the construction area very nicely. It's very good thing the way that it's set up. You have two hallways here, kind of in parallel. And we are able to segment it and keep, kind of negative pressure so that air and other things don't flow into the occupied area. So we think it's a very good, safe way to get this thing back.
And I think that's one of the most important points. If we didn't have that second hallway, we would not be able to do what we're proposing to do. Because we have the two hallways, we're able to completely close off areas of the building that will be under construction while keeping students in other parts of the building completely safe.
Yeah, it's fortunate. Our original plan, we had said that maybe we would just make, not utilize this, and that was really a non-starter with administration. We need every classroom. So we were able to build to figure out how to do that here.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Can you talk about what outdoor space would be available during the construction?
Good evening, everyone. The rear of the building, we're probably going to use for construction laydown area, access for dumpsters and that sort of thing in the very beginning, and that's just the macadam area in the back. The playground that's in the courtyard up here, we had inspected by a certified playground inspector. That is acceptable. The two playgrounds that are on the side towards the township building and the high school, they are also acceptable in their current condition. We're going to add a little mulch back to them, as a lot of the mulch was washed away. The roof on one of the slide structures was blown off, but that can still be utilized as it is until the new roof comes in. So the only thing that won't be accessible in the back is the macadam area across the back of this area right here. There's some fence work that has to be done back there, and again, we're going to use that for laydown so that the contractors can access through the stairwell in the back, and that isolates that from the rest of the school.
Anyone else? All right, please continue, Bill.
Next slide, if you could actually 2 slides. Bill, we're going to have you talk to this or else, sorry.
So, Mr. Lester, Mr. Leckman, and myself met with several representatives of the township along with the architect, Michael Johnson, to go over, our plan with the township and what they were going to require to allow us to reopen. So we had offered some stuff that, we felt would need to be done prior to occupancy, and the township had a few more requirements that they asked for. So right now what we have is we have a SharePoint file shared with all the township that we're uploading documents to. And we, expressed our timeline with the township. The township was amenable to the timeline and what we needed to do. So some of the things that, we went ahead and did already is we've tested and certified the fire alarm system. We removed the heavily damaged area from the system itself, and once construction is done in that area, it will be added back as a separate zone. We're going to complete the roofing repairs. They're not done yet. We're waiting for the thermal imaging scan. The roof that was torn off on the backside of the building has been done. There are a couple small spots in the existing building and one piece of roof deck that still need to be completed, but we're working with the roofer to get them completed prior to the students coming back into the building. We're working, the school district is actually working on removing all the box material. If anybody's been to the school, you'll see that the gymnasium was looked like a warehouse of boxes from all the things that were removed. So the classrooms that we're occupying, the district is moving all those items back into the classroom, and anything that remains, like the library and items like that that we can't move, we're either going to go into storage or go to a remote storage location. The district is also working to have the kitchen cleaned, and the Montgomery County Department of Health come in and inspect that prior to reoccupancy, so that there really was no damage to that area, so it's just a matter of a touch-up cleaning since it's been unoccupied for a couple of months. We're moving the temporary partitions. So initially, the insurance company was gracious enough to put in some temporary partitions to save one side of the building from the other. Based on our reoccupancy plan, we're going to move a couple of those partitions, and that will segregate students from the construction workers so that there is no interaction between the two. They asked that we add exit signage in 3 locations because we're keeping the bathrooms that are on either side of the LGI, on the second floor and the first floor. The paths of egress out of the building are a little bit different, so we're going to add 3 temporary signs for that. And then we're providing full reports on the electrical system in the occupied areas that they have been tested and certified and are good to go. And we're also providing elevator, fire alarm, and playground reports for the township. The fire alarm has been completed. The playground has been completed. I'm just waiting for the letters from those certified inspectors in order to turn that over. We're also installing scrubbing fans. What we're going to do is take that construction area and make sure we create negative pressure at all times. That will keep any dust, dirt, and odors from the occupied area of the school so that there's no impingement on educational process other than noise, and we'll try to keep that to an extreme minimum. We're also working on the exterior fencing repairs. The repairs that are severe are down in that back area where we're going to use that as a laydown area, but there's a little bit of touch-up repair that we need to do in the upper courtyard area on the Highland Avenue side. So we want to make sure that's safe, the gates are closed, the kids can't get out of there and down into the construction area, down into the retaining spaces in the back where the fences are really heavily damaged. And then lastly, we're working with the district to ask if there's additional preparation spaces that are needed. Do we need to convert the gymnasium into 4 classrooms, which the district has indicated they don't believe they need. But we do have that option at times, that there's additional spaces that were at one point used for something else. Maybe we need to think outside the box and create that as an educational space so that we can move as many kids back as possible. So that's our plan with the township and moving forward for occupancy.
All right, thanks. Any more comments or questions? Keith?
Before occupancy, do you need to do an air quality test, and all your water systems need to be tested? Is that already?
So the water system does not need to be tested. There was no infiltration or damage to any of that. We have had 2 individual industrial hygienists look at the air quality in the building, and they have all passed. There were a couple of carpeted areas that were identified. They have since either been cleaned and were removed. So that we will retest those areas again once that's complete. But we've got a clean bill of health for all the air inside the building at this time.
And just keep in mind, while there's no specific water testing that has to be done, we test our water regularly. So those tests will continue.
Yeah, and just sort of flushing systems every once in a while, even if the building is not occupied. Is that happening? Has that happened? I think you spoke to that in the past.
Yes, that's still happening. And because we have a version control system to treat the water that's coming in from the pipes, we're still required by the state, so we still have weekly testing from an independent company. And we have water operator that stops and weekly checks the systems are operating correctly. And we actually install automatic devices to it. So even when we're not building, the water's still being flushed on the constant.
Did we have any, to do any asbestos or lead mitigation? And if so, what's been done or what still has to be done?
So there are several areas during the demolition of the damaged areas that we did identify some ACM materials. They have been abated at this time. I'm sure as we go through construction, there may be other areas that we find, but everything that's been exposed so far has been mitigated and tested and cleared.
Just for the benefit of our community, because we're talking about an elementary school, can you explain, just for people who aren't as familiar with asbestos, that, you know, it didn't pose a problem for the students when they were in the building, it's not until it's actually, you know, exposed through construction? Just put people's minds at ease about that.
So the school district is required to complete a HAIR report on a regular basis, and that HAIR report explains where and what is in the building. There, you know, anything that we exposed, we removed, but anything that's still concealed and confined that we can't get to has not been done yet. At some point that will be done. For instance, behind some of the blackboards, there was an adhesive that was used, and until you remove those boards, you really have no access to those glue dots. So same thing with the flooring, whether it's floor tile or the adhesive that's used for it. When it's exposed or when it needs to be removed, then that's when that work is done. But not until then. There's no danger as long as it's left in its current position.
That was exactly the point I was hoping you would make.
Sorry, it took me a while to get there.
No problem, you got it.
Any other questions on that or anything else before we get to the next steps?
Yeah, let's go ahead.
Okay, excellent. Sorry, I know there's a lot of information. Trying to break it down to simple pieces, but the next steps that we have is we had put together a quick development agreement as you gave us a purchase order for. Our next agreement is to do the actual construction management, putting it back together. We're doing some of that work now, but it's really for the next phase. So we have a couple of agreements that we're putting together for the district to review. That's the construction management as well as the design agreement. So that's a big next step for us. At some point when we have more information for you, we'll come to you with some decisions to be made on the parity decision as well as the HVAC decision. We don't have that information just yet, but when we do, obviously we'll give a full report on that, and then the decision will be the board's eyes. That's everything we had for this evening.
I'm certain that the big question for most of us in the property community is, of course, timeline. And, you know, it's conspicuously absent from your presentation, presumably because we don't have one yet. But is there anything you can say about when we're likely to?
I really hesitate until we have all the materials, the long lead items ready. At that point, we will be able to gauge what the timeline is going to be. It's a struggle right now. So as soon as we get a general contractor on board, that's the better time to build that. Right now, it would be total speculation on our part, which is it's just a bad spot to be. You don't want to put out publicly timelines that you can't meet. So we're a little hesitant to do that.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? GQ.
Just to clarify, the timeline we just talked about, that's the timeline for the portion that we're not gonna.
Yeah, that's for the piece that needs major reconstruction. Yeah, the timeline for the building occupancy of all the green section, yeah, we're solid on that because there's not a lot of long lead items that we have to get them ready to go. It's the other part that's problematic.
Oh, thank you.
Yes. Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Oh, yeah, okay, that's a good good point, thank you. So does anyone have any questions regarding insurance while we're here too? Or did you have anything to? Okay, no questions for insurance at this time? Steve?
I just want to thank Utica for their continued assistance with the district. We're meeting often, and so it's really helpful, the collaboration that we've had, not only with Utica, but with ICS, really with everyone, because there are so many moving parts that it really takes the collaboration of multiple agencies to pull off what we're trying to pull off. So thank you, everyone.
Great, I will show that as well. All right, thank you very much for that update. We're going to move on to our next presentation, which is the food service bids for 22-23. And it looks like this one's
Hi, everybody.
Kristen, please stop right into the one.
Right in there.
Yeah.
All right. Can you hear me well?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for having me tonight. Today, I'm going to do a very, very brief presentation to discuss the status of this year's first bid and how Upper Dublin is involved in moving forward with not only our bid for next year, but the bid that's going to be the lead bid for about 64 school districts in the area. Okay, so I just want to start off by recapping how we've been conducting business for the last 5 years. And Upper Dublin, myself in particular, has been collaborating very strongly with Great Valley School District, who is the lead agent on our bid, which resulted in a 5-year contract. Initially, the bid had an initial term of 2 years, and then we rolled for 3, which was very beneficial and resulted in a prime vendor relationship with US Foods. Right now, we have awarded US Foods as our prime vendor. That's who we're still maintaining and dealing with, but the term expires on June 30th. So we have to begin the bid process now in order to have results that we can divert commodity processing for. And if you go to our next slide, I'll get you started. So right now we are actively engaged in writing our bid and volume gathering, organizing specifications, etc. Upper Dublin School District, my department in particular, will be the lead agent on this bid, which is why we're here today to kind of just discuss the responsibilities that my department will have and how this will impact the other school districts. We are not going to operate as an organized cooperative, but we do utilize a clause that PE recommends through piggybacking. So we hope to be the lead agent and have around 65 local school districts piggyback on this bid. The reason why we collaborate in this fashion is because we hope to get volume-based cost decreases and become consistent with the products that we're using within the market. We hope that being 65 school districts engages distributors to want to become our vendor as well. Traditionally, I will say that school food service departments are not in particularly sought after. We have very low margins. We have very high demands. Believe it or not, there's not a huge market for a whole grain, low sodium chicken nugget in the retail space. So we have really strict nutritional guidelines that fluctuate all the time and can result in a lot of formulation changes. And we have really, really tight delivery windows as well, because we accept deliveries during very, very specific hours. And we have buses to avoid and parent drop-offs and breakfast and lunch and all of the things that restaurants, hospitals, etc. don't have to contend with. So, piggybacking is the way that we've tried to get past this and become interesting to vendors. So, the terms of this contract, because of the supply chain, because there's a lot of new distributors on the market, we're hoping to start this contract with an initial term of simply 1 year. This decision was made in case we do get into a relationship with a vendor that is brand new, so we can make sure that this is the right market for them and that it's a mutually beneficial environment. From there, we went right into our bid language for yearly renewal clauses. The valuation of this bid is approximately $25 to $30 million a year, with just on bid awarded items. And I say this because clearly there's going to be micro purchases and other purchases that school districts would make that are items outside of the bid, such as like catering and a la carte pieces. We do hope that this results in a prime vendor award. We have consulted the solicitor, and when our bid document, our RFP document is finalized, we will only proceed once Upper Dublin solicitor has reviewed the recommendations and changes. I do want to give you a timeline. This is an aggressive timeline, I'll just be straightforward. Traditionally, you will not see school districts try to get everything out before winter break. But I really felt, as the leader of this cooperative, I felt it was important so that we could kind of secure manufacturer pricing best we could and get some stability for next school year. This week, we hope to finalize the language, send that to the solicitor. We finalize our volume gathering for all 65 school districts. Once we get approval or recommendations and we finalize the language we're going to be sending from the solicitor, we will advertise for 3 weeks, and in January we're going to have a pre-bid meeting so our distributors can come in person and virtually to meet with us, ask us questions. It's a substantial amount of money, it's a substantial responsibility. There's 285 locations that this potential distributor would be shipping to each week. So they're going to have questions. We anticipate being able to answer those questions, written response or we'll ask our interested parties to send us their written questions by the 14th, and then we'll issue an addendum by the 21st. Public opening will be Friday, the 18th of February. And then this is around 1,000 SKU list, so there's a lot of making things apples to apples, oranges to oranges, so we'll have about a week evaluation period. We will go to the big group to see if we're going to accept or not. We're going to anticipate accepting. And then we anticipate sending this information to finance on the 16th to ask for that to be sent to the board for approval. I think that is long and short. Any questions I can answer?
All right, I see several hands. Jen?
Sure.
So, I assume you have to go with the lowest bid, is that correct?
So this is going to be an RFP. The cost is about 90% of the awarding factors. Other factors there will be other quantified factors, such as potential cost decreases or cost savings because of early payment. I have to actually ask because I have not put this out to Ed or had this publicly announced, the specificities, but I will say that 10% will be non-price related attributes from the vendor.
So do they have certain criteria in order to qualify to bid on this?
Absolutely, sure thing. So I can give you some examples. So for example, they have to accept the delivery locations and the school districts that are involved within the original, delivery locations and participants list. They have to have the ability, which is difficult, to coordinate USDA diversion commodity funds. So not every, I can't go to Costco and say, hey, the USDA gave me 50 pounds to put towards this production of manufactured chicken. Only certain establishments can do that. A strict HACCP plan, strict delivery protocols, etc. Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
DT.
Yeah, this sounds like quite an operation. In terms of staffing, are you able to support this with your current staff, or does this require additional staffing if you're taking on, if the district takes on this role, or your department takes on this role?
So this is not something that my staff in particular are affected by. It's solely me who is affected by it, yeah.
But that means that you will not be available for other things, potentially.
Potentially, but I will say that I would be participating regardless to ensure that our district gets the best pricing possible and that we are in front of any issues that might arise. So my time is going to be spent there anyway. I can give a real good example. I collaborated so heavily with Great Valley, even though they were the lead agent, that when supply chain erupted the first week of school, and US Food said to us, we're not going to ship to you for 2 months. It was me and Nicole who were on the phone with FEMA, who were on the phone with PDE. I was actively participating in that regardless of my lead agent status.
Okay, so in that sense, you're doing the work already.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. In terms of the 65 groups, is everybody financially responsible for their part, or will the lead district have some additional financial responsibility, and if so, what would that be?
Sure, that's a valid question. The lead agent has no financial responsibility towards the purchases of the other districts, nor if they default on any of their purchases. And that language is all explained very thoroughly in our bid document, for sure.
Great. I mean, I think the energy that you're putting in this is incredible, and we really appreciate that.
Just sort of piggybacking on Letitia's question, because she stole part of my question. Is there any benefit to the lead? I mean, I think it's great you taking the lead, and I don't mean to sound selfish, I'm just curious. Is there any benefit to whoever takes on that road?
There's no financial benefit specifically, but I think that there is a benefit because I do get to collaborate with leaders in our industry. I get to be the voice for, as a dietitian, as a leader in our school nutrition industry, to what products I think should be put on our menus and advocate. I get to have relationships with manufacturers and vendors, and I get to not have a passive approach to leading our department. So there is a benefit to Upper Dublin because of my ability to do those things, for sure, in my opinion.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
For the benefit of the nutritionally unwashed like myself, are all food groups covered in this agreement, or are there some that we actually have to go and purchase on our own?
Yeah, so essentially, to answer your question, no, all food groups are not covered in this agreement. So let me give you 2 very clean examples of that. Dairy milk, fluid milk, we have a separate bid for our milk purveyor. Okay, so we, are in contract currently with Creamaland. They provide, our milk deliveries twice a week. Same with bread, fresh bread. We don't have frozen bread in the district. So there are some things that are not covered for sure. And of course, I will say as a district, when I've made decisions for our department on different products that I'd like to bring on. Let me take, for example, when I wanted to do whole muscle chicken, that wasn't on our existing bid, so I go out on my own to quote or bid that as I see fit for our department. So it's not 100% whole. We definitely have other procurement to do. I procure for our department produce separately, simply because I didn't like the quality that was coming in from one distributor. So we still have a lot of autonomy in our decisions, but this covers lion's share for sure. It takes a lot of the administrative burden out of our day-to-day operations.
Thank you for all you and your team are doing.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
And I just have a question on the flip side. Are there any drawbacks to being the lead agent other than your investment of additional time to do it?
I don't think that there are drawbacks that affect the district other than the additional time. And again, I feel like and I think maybe Andy could speak to this, I don't feel like my participation has negatively affected the district at all. If anything, it's been a straight benefit. But I will say it does come at a cost, a weekend cost or a night cost, and, off work time cost, for sure. But no drawbacks.
Appreciate your time doing these commitments that you want to take.
Thank you.
Jeff?
Kristen, the 65 school districts, do we have like lock-in or buy-in from them? And I guess my question goes to, like midway through this process, could half of them go rogue and destroy the volume-based incentive we have, or is there something to prevent that from happening?
Sure, I think there's a couple of pieces. So one, there's definitely, I'll start with the easiest piece. We definitely have an affiliation agreement that I asked, we have this listener kind of review and confirm, and it really outlines the expectations of these participating organizations as, like SFAs, we want to kind of collaborate. So it does, unofficially, it's official, they're signed it, it's approved by their board, just like all of my affiliations with other school districts are approved by our board. But there also is language within our bid that talks about what would happen if a school district decided to get off the bid, or there's a change of food service management. So for example, if SFA goes from self-op to management, what would happen then? So there's some language that just essentially says, we're off the hook as a district, and the distributor can take it up with that in particular SFA.
Great, thanks for all you're doing. Appreciate it.
Corollary question to Jeff's, to me. If we get all the way through the bids and this board decides we don't like it for some reason and we say no, does that affect the other 65 school districts? Yeah, are we making a decision for 66 school districts, or are we making a decision next to us?
The decision would potentially affect anybody who piggybacks, but ultimately, that's the capacity that they're operating in. Yes. So if this is not board approved, they simply wouldn't piggyback and they could start from square one.
Okay.
And as would I start from square one.
Right.
Mm-hmm. That's the risk, I think, with any of the way that we operate this.
Yep.
Okay?
All right, anybody else have questions for Kristen? All right, thanks very much for our presentation. We'll look forward to the next steps. All right, so moving into the business part of the meeting. Next up, any announcements, Andy?
I do not have any announcements this evening.
Okay, we do have minutes from our November 17th meeting. So I don't remember what we do in this case. So is it just Mike and I are making this? I'm not sure what we're doing.
I can run the school district, I can turn the microphone on. I think in this case, let's just move it forward for information, because I don't know that, because the old committee doesn't exist and the new committee wasn't in existence yet, I think if we just move it forward as information, that will suffice.
All right, so members of the committee, we've all had a chance to review the minutes from last month. Is everyone prepared to move forward to the legislative meeting? Yes. All right, thank you. And into the reports and recommendations. First up, we have security assessment by Cam Doris. I assume Prakash is going to lead us through that one.
Good evening. I would like to take this opportunity to share information about our need to have network audit performed. Over the last few years, many districts have faced disruptions on their network, everything from a DDoS attack to hijacking of student and staff personal information. These malicious characters are looking to penetrate the school network using various schemes from phishing emails to unauthorized entry on our network. Once access is gained, they can disrupt the workflow in a multitude of ways, such as locking data using encryption code, installing malware that can capture sensitive data, deny access to applications used to read data files, or hold data for ransom. Part of creating a safe network is knowing where vulnerabilities exist, taking steps to mitigate those vulnerabilities. These vulnerabilities may exist in operating systems, services and application flaws, improper configuration, or risky end-user behavior. Over the last years, we have instituted practices to support security, such as performing weekly OS updates on all Chromebooks, as well as routine maintenance of all Windows machines. Using Trackit, we're able to pull metadata from all Windows PCs, including licensing information, software versions, which allows us to identify PCs that need to install updates. Though these measures help move us closer to being safe, it is not enough. Like many tech directors, I'm not concerned about what Pandora's will find. I'm concerned about what we do not know about our network. Working with Candoris, we will be able to conduct a comprehensive assessment of our network by performing an internal and external pen test over the course of 8 business days. The pen test will help us identify where our network has the potential to be exploited by outside users whose sole intention is to create costly disruptions. Performing this assessment will also support us in getting cyber insurance coverage, as many companies are asking schools to provide additional documentation regarding user access and security measures. To further leverage this work, I've expressed to Candoris the importance of not just coming in and telling us where we fall short, but also taking time to provide the tech department with education to support safety for the long run. I'll take any questions that you guys may have regarding this contract.
All right, anybody on the committee? Steve, do you have something?
So some of you may remember, I guess it's 2 years ago now, Souderton had a ransomware attack. They were without email capabilities, without electronic gradebook capabilities, really without any electronic capabilities for a long period of time. We're starting to see more and more of those instances, not just here in the area, but across the state, across the nation. I'm glad Prakash is bringing this forward because, as he said, it's not just what Candoris might find, but it's also to have that education piece so that we don't find ourselves on the wrong end of a malicious attack. So thank you.
You too.
Is this a one-time deal, or is this an ongoing relationship that we're looking at?
It would be our choice to continue working with them moving forward. This is for one assessment of our network.
And is Candora's experience in dealing with school districts in particular?
Yeah, so the project manager that is going to be assigned to us is a former tech director of a school district.
All right.
So he understands what we're dealing with.
And have you worked with them before?
I have not.
Let me just get you guys, why Candoris?
So one of the things that they shared with us in our conversations was the education piece. So they were not interested in just coming in and telling us what is wrong, but they wanted us to be educated about what they were finding and make sure that our staff is empowered. When I talked to some of the other vendors, they were interested in drafting up a contract and saying, we'll come in, we'll tell you what's wrong, and we'll tell you how to fix it, and call us back. I think it's important for my team to have the awareness so that they can do work throughout the year to continue to support us.
Okay.
Prakash, is this type of analysis either a requirement of our insurance program, or could it have insurance benefits for us based on the outcomes?
So when we did our insurance renewal, they asked us for certain measures to be in place, like multi-factor authentication. How do we secure our backup? What kind of encryption do we have? What does our guest Wi-Fi policy look like? So they do look at these results. And Candoris will provide us documentation that we can share with insurance companies to assure them that we have put in measures to secure our network.
Andy?
Did you talk to anybody who's used Candoris in the past, and/or did they, have they serviced other school districts for this type of project?
Yeah, so we do have Director of Technology for Montgomery County that meet on a regular basis. A couple of the school districts had wonderful things to say about indoors and their work experience with them. So this wouldn't be the first time the school district has used them.
Yeah.
In terms of the cost of the project, how did the cost for some of the other vendors stack up against this one?
So Integra was around 70,000. We're not a significantly large school district, so some of the districts that did use Pandora's, their project scope was much bigger. So part of the cost is driven by the size of our network.
Gosh, what's the period of performance for the assessment and report generation? And obviously, if there's any education and mitigation steps we have to take.
So the actual assessment of the network is 8 days. Prior to the start of the assessment, we do have to set up virtual machines for them to act as the interior, if you would, of our network. So part of the test will be done with them connecting internally. And then the second part of the assessment is them trying to connect from the outside coming in. So that will be a total of 8 days to do the actual assessment. The setup, it could vary from a day to 2 days. It's a matter of how quickly it can be run on the virtual machine to access. And then once all that information is gathered, then they'll meet with us to go through the results.
And when they actually do the intrusions, that's going to be random, no one on our side, it's going to be those on your team.
So we will know when that assessment's happening so that when we see flags coming up, we know that it's Pandora's that's triggering those flags. We'll also have to notify some of our vendors as well that we are performing this assessment so they're not aware of it. Early.
If we were to enter into contract with them, how long would it take for them to actually come to our district and get started?
I don't have the exact timeline because the first thing they need to do is get this contract authorized, and then we'll set up the timeline as to when they will begin.
But basically, it's not going to take a long period of time because obviously, after discussing this, it raises concern. And we want to, if indeed we move this forward, get this into place as soon as possible.
Yeah, so we're not looking at late spring. This will start as soon as I get the blessing from this. Jen?
Will the end users know that this is going on, or business as usual, or does it?
It's business as usual because we want to try to capture the weakness of our end users as well. But the people that we do need to notify are those vendors such as our network security cameras. They're going to be tapped into it. So we want to make sure the vendors are aware that we are the ones that are doing this.
All right, I have a few more. And, this is my field, so I probably know enough to be dangerous here. But so I'm a little slightly confused or maybe concerned that you mentioned we're setting up devices presumably on our network within our firewall perimeter for them to attack, and they're also going to attack from outside. Did I understand that correctly?
Yes.
So the contract suggests that physical security is not part of the scope at all. In network security, as I'm sure you know, once you get access to any of the devices, that tremendously changes the opportunity for attack. And I'm kind of interested in that because while clearly there's a lot more attackers outside our network than there are within, this is hard to put properly, but I was a high school student once who was smart enough to know this stuff. Clever high school students have opportunities that attackers on the internet don't. And I'd be interested in knowing what opportunities we might be missing that they have. For instance, there's IP phones sitting on presumably a different VLAN than other devices. There's APs that they can access the network port to that are presumably on a different VLAN and may have vulnerabilities to that path that don't seem like they're in scope.
So when they do the internal assessment, they'll be given credentials to get into the network. And then once they're in, They will run various codes to see how far they can access into the network. So that piece will be done. They'll look at the guest Wi-Fi as well. Our main concern was the penetration piece. How quickly can someone gain access to data? And where is that happening? Our firewall is our first line of defense, which is running the most current definitions to ensure that we are not lagging in having the firewall up to date. The external is when no one has credentials, so they're just finding a way at the access points to see if they can gain access. Whereas the internal, we are giving them credentials and saying, here, go see what we can do. And that's important for us to know so that if a student or any of our users, credentials are released or identified by someone on the outside, what is it that they can really get to?
All right, I appreciate that, and I certainly agree that that's where the primary threat and the primary concern needs to be. Because I'd like to add to the scope, and I understand it would add to the cost, but I'd like to add to the scope to allow them to access physical infrastructure that is accessible without a key within the building to see what else they could do, because I do think there are opportunities there that could be used. I also, in your introduction, you talked about distributed denial of service attacks as something that some districts have suffered from, and that's not in scope either. Although I don't think there's any point in surveying that because there's really nothing we can do.
The IU does support us in the event that we were to have a DDoS attack, so we do have support in place.
And then you mentioned in response to Jeff about the insurance company asking certain questions, and that brings to mind that the questions that an insurance company are asking in that case are kind of like the questions that a security auditor would ask. They're just sort of yes or no sort of rules. Are you doing this best practice? Are you doing that best practice? And very often those questions are outdated and not really best practice anymore. And I'm cautious about paying attention to that kind of thing or letting that dictate our path in any way, because that's not actual security, that's compliance. I think I hope Candoras is more focused on actual security and not checkbox kind of compliance. For example, they may ask questions like, do you make your users change their passwords every whatever period, which used to be best practice and no longer is. And so that's the kind of thing that I hope they're not asking. It sounds like they're not. They're going to do a genuine penetration test in addition to the other things. But those kinds of questions that are not meaningful security.
No, the insurance companies will let you ask us those kind of questions.
So with that in mind, when this comes back next week to the legislative meeting, I'd be curious how much more it would cost to have the physical intrusion at the high school piece. And I'm not saying, break into closets. I'm just talking about stuff that's actually accessible to students.
I can look into that.
Yeah. Any other comments or questions? All right. Okay. Go ahead.
Sorry, one more question. On the back end, when the study is completed, I see the in scope is, of course, they're going to organize the results, tell us recommended areas. But let's say, for example, they recommend that we need additional training for our students, for example, on fishing or whatever. Do they help with that training? Because I don't technically see that as one of the in scope items. So if they do assist with that, it would be great if that's spelled out so we can make sure we get that benefit in here. And if it's not in scope, then is there an additional cost, or is that something your department would provide? How would that work?
So Candoras does have a training portal that is available for our end users. They use a vendor called KnowBefore, and what they do is they push out communication to our staff, and when staff clicks on those communications or opens up that content, it automatically sends them to a training portal. We do have the ability to give them a window of time to get the training So they do offer a product to support phishing campaigns. We can pull data on that as well to find out how many users actually fell for those phishing emails. The wonderful thing with that product is that it provides immediate training to the staff and not 3-4 days later. So they do have a product available for that.
But is that part of this or that?
It isn't, because we don't know if that is going to be a need for us. So the other conversation is once they deliver the findings to us, talk about the next step actions to counter some of those findings. And we don't know what we're going to find.
All right, so in general, yeah, I'm completely supportive of this. This is a wise move. Certainly best practice to have other people try to attack your network from time to time and see what they find and take advantage of that. So I wouldn't be surprised if people watching or other people outside think that sounds kind of questionable practice. But just to be clear, in the industry, that is the right way to do it. So it does sound weird at times to ask people to try what they can, but that's what we're doing here, and that's the right thing to do. All right, thanks for the question.
Thank you.
All right, moving on. So we'll move that one forward, maybe?
Yes.
All right, thank you. We have something to update.
Okay, as I discussed a little bit last meeting, the phase of the project is really turning away from the heavy construction, and we're now really at that finishes and systems portion of the project. Going through the building, you would see a lot of the sound absorbing finishes for the art rooms, the library, music rooms. It's a decorative wood panel that acts as sound absorption. They're all starting to get put in place. Ceiling is going in the library, and everything's starting to take shape. We're discussing, they're working on the install of all the curtains that we have in the classrooms, all the shades that need to be in place. That process is starting. On the big move, the big milestone for us was with PICO. The gas meter is now installed, which is really what we needed for this winter. Now they can do the startup on the boilers. We can get temporary heat going, get our air handlers started up. All that's coming up very quickly. We're already starting up the equipment. This is the point where our facility staff gets involved as well. As equipment is being started, we get to witness it, we get to learn about it, and talk to the technicians. So our facility staff will be involved in those startups. Again, more electric is coming into place. We now have power to our mechanical equipment that's needed. Fire alarms being configured so we can start running some of this HVAC equipment, start flushing the building out, get fresh air in, some temporary heat. And then on the exterior, some of the site work is starting that we need for the next phase of the project. We're set to meet this week to talk about interior space that can start demobilizing the construction trailers. Typically what happens is the mechanical, electrical contract, they'll remove their trailers from the site, they'll give them space in the building, typically in a storage room or a mechanical room where they'll set their drawing table up, and that's where their employees will gather for the day. So the moving of their trailers off site will allow that site work to progress some drainage systems that need to be done. We should start to see that very quickly.
Great. And Andy, can we call our second on the budget?
Nothing specific.
All right, comments or questions?
On the budget, I looked at the report and it shows really nicely thank you. It shows us pretty well what our budget is and what our actual to date is. And one thing that it doesn't show is what is projected outstanding, what's left to go. Do we see any big risk areas that could have a budgetary impact for going forward?
So column 4 on the report does show the amount remaining. I agree it doesn't project necessarily areas of concern, but I don't know that there's any major areas of concern. Right now there are certainly items that Dewey is working with some of our contractors on related to supply chain issues, but nothing specific that's been put in front of us.
The majority of the big ticket items were purchased well before COVID and school, so.
Correct.
Any labor issues that we foresee, due to the COVID situation?
None of that can be aware of.
Excellent. Thank you.
I would just offer that Mr. Zaza, who's our on-site professional, has told us time and again there will be no problem with occupying the building for the start of the school year. However, some of the site work, because of supply chain issues and whatnot, may be a little bit delayed.
Anybody else? Okay. Thank you for that update. We'll move on to item C, disposal of excess obsolete non-repairable equipment. Just 2 items on the list this month. Any comments or questions? No? All right, so we'll move that forward.
Yes.
Yes. All right. So if you're not, we got to develop our group. All right, on to the fund balance review.
Yes, so there is an attachment with the agenda item and in the packet here. I would say at this point, our annual financial audit is basically complete. Really all we're waiting for at this point is the final report to be delivered. So it's complete enough that I'm comfortable providing a review of our year-end fund balance. And that's a requirement of our board policy 620, which provides the guidance for management of the district fund balance. And what it states is that each year, I or designee is to review the district fund balance on a finance committee meeting. So we'll do that briefly tonight. So as of June 30th, 2021, the district had a total general fund balance of $14,417,465. And fund balance is broken down into 5 main categories. There's committed fund balance, which is fund balance that's designated by board action for a specific purpose. So the board has committed fund balance funds for real estate assessment appeals of $1.5 million and a health stabilization fund of $2.6 million. There is an assigned fund balance of $768,833, and that is to any funds that are set aside in the budget to balance our budget get assigned. And then we also have student activities funds that are in the assigned fund balance. We have non-spendable fund balance of $137,118. Non-spendable fund balance are prepaid expenses and value of inventory make up that bucket. We have $51,525 in restricted fund balance. Restricted fund balance is specifically scholarships as designated by outside donors. This is a new category. It was a accounting rule that was put in place that we were required to implement this year. So scholarships used to be part of Fund 71, but now that is no longer an item that can be segregated into its own fund. So we now capture it in the general fund as a restricted fund balance that can be only be used for their designated purpose, which is scholarships. And then our unassigned fund balance, which is just our general fund balance that can be used for any purpose, is $9,359,989. Our board policy does recommend maintaining this balance between 5 and 8% of total budgeted expenditures. And when our budget was passed, the unassigned fund balance was 7.4%. On page 2, there's a chart which trends out fund balance over the last couple of years. And I think this is an interesting chart. Not only has the district fund balance increased, but there are more important factors within the change in the bars from 1920 to 2021. Again, you see it online with the color, not so much in the packet. But I think it's meaningful to note that there's an increase in the yellow bar and a reduction in the gray bar. And if you look at the chart, the yellow bar is the unassigned fund balance. And you can see that that increased pretty substantially from last year, prior year, 1920. The unassigned fund balance has been trending below the 5.5 to 8% board guideline, and in 21-22 it was 7.4%, which was very strong. And this was achieved through a very positive year financially in 1920, but also another very important reason in that the gray bar was reduced significantly, and the gray bar represents the assigned fund balance. And the majority of the assigned fund balance is what is used to balance the budget, so the gap between revenues and expenses. And in the past, that's trended around $3 million. And if you remember, the budget that the board passed for 21-22 only required about $750,000 to be used to balance the budget. So again, things continue to trend positively, and the fund balance is a strong indicator of our financial health, the financial health of the district. And again, another reason why I recommend moving forward with the budget opt-out resolution that the board passed last month.
All right, lots of good news in there. Any comments or questions from the committee or the rest of the board? Teacher.
Is the fund balance a big factor in our needs or other
Certainly, fund balance is a key indicator that Moody's uses to issue our credit rating.
So would there be any concern that the scientists know that much more? I would expect that as a positive, but I just wanted to make sure that there isn't anything hiding there.
No, we would certainly communicate that as a positive, and I think overall, I don't know that Moody's looks necessarily specifically at the breakdowns, they look at really the bottom line only, but certainly I think that's when we tell our story to Moody's, that's a positive portion of the story that we would tell.
Great, excellent, thank you.
Anybody else? Yeah.
Quick question, Andy, the 5 to 8% range that we stick to by board policy, is that a standard among our peers? I mean, that's not something that we need to reevaluate, that's still a good benchmark?
I think it's a good benchmark, I think that's a pretty standard range that most school districts implement.
It is relatively unusual to have that in policy, but it's certainly best practice. All right.
Andy, at this point, we have nothing budgeted for transfer to capital projects for this year.
No, we do for this year, and that's actually one of the recommendations for tonight. The 21-23 year, we have $1.9 million set aside to transfer, and that's actually, we'll go through that tonight. We don't have anything in the 22-23 preliminary draft of the budget.
Is that 1.9 part of 14?
That would absolutely be part of the 14 when we close the year last year, yes. It's part of now the $750,000 that's assigned to balance the budget next year.
But remember that the 14 is last year, and the 1.9 is from this year. Anyone else? All right, thank you for that update. Monthly financial reports.
Yeah, so there's nothing major to go through. I'll just point out a couple key numbers here. So on page 26 in the packet, the November Treasurer's Report, you can see that revenues are about 81% received to date compared to 79% last year, so very much in line. I will note on expenses that 32% has been spent this year, which is slightly below last year at 35%. And I think that's important to note because if you remember last year, spending is down about $2 million from last year compared year over year. Last November, we ran into a planned situation where the construction fund, our bond fund, was out of cash because we were waiting for January to go through the next borrowing, and we actually made $2 million worth of payments in November and about 1.6 in December out of the general fund. And then we reimbursed that from when the bond proceeds came in. So I think that's why we're trending a little out of whack right now, because that $2 million is part of last year's number when you compare it year over year. So that will come back in line in January. On the other financial reports, the only things I'll really point out there is on the assessment change report. It's not updated from last month. We have not yet received the county report. So without that, we have nothing to update there. The tax collector report, we have about almost a 95% collection rate, which is slightly ahead of prior year. But again, we expected that because a large chunk came in December without the penalty period last year. And then page 4, EIT continues to remain strong. November was about 17% higher than prior years, but very much in line with the budget. ESSER I won't cover here because we have a whole presentation on the ESSER funding, so I'll stop there and ask if there's any questions.
Anyone? Teacher?
Yes, is there anything, any updates on the taxes for any people who have applied for a reduction because of
The rebate program.
no, actually because of the storm?
Oh.
So that comes on the monthly report that we, the assessment report that we get from the county, and we don't have that yet this month. So it's not typical that we don't have that on a monthly basis, but we don't have it. So no, there's no update tonight.
I did have a couple of questions about, on the operations and maintenance side, $2 million decrement from last year to this year. That was we discussed the bond payment. On the revenue side, really strong performance on real estate tax, real estate transfer tax. Do we see that as a component of the new properties coming online? Also, the increase in property values, a little bit of both. Do you have a feel for that?
So interim property taxes are all from either improvements that are done on properties or new properties that are selling. So I would say the vast majority of that is from new developments and homes selling after July 1.
So we see that as sustainable, not necessarily.
And the problem.
Right. So we see that as sustainable, not necessarily.
No, that's not sustainable. That is truly one time. So Tom and I, once that's developed, will no longer receive interim taxes. It'll become part of our base real estate taxes now next year. So it'll be sustainable from that portion, but that specific line item, the interim taxes will only be one time.
With real estate, that's sustainable.
Correct. So every time that assessment comes in, we receive interim taxes this year. Now what I do is I actually put that into the budgeted revenue for next year, and that's where you start to see the real estate tax revenue line item trend upward in our budget for next year.
Thank you. Anyone else? You guys, members of the committee, will move that one forward to the legislative meeting?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, stimulus funding plan, you do that.
Yes, so we've been looking at that stimulus funding plan, and Brooke will bring up a presentation here. So included in the agenda was a narrative document which will go on our website. What I put together was just a summary of everything that was in that narrative document, just to walk through them, right? So we've been talking about the ESSER funding for months now, and tonight what I'm going to provide is an overview of the district's plans for spending to prevent, prepare for, or respond to COVID-19 pandemic. Specifically focus on what we're required to do. It's a requirement for the ESSER 3 ARP funding, but we felt it was very important. ESSER, all of the funding that we've received around COVID is a comprehensive plan, and we don't really want to just focus on one piece of it. I think that's what our plan represents and we put together. So, Upper Dublin School District received 6 different sources of funding for the COVID relief funding, stimulus funding. 5 were through the state, which all school districts received allocation, and 1 was unique to Montgomery County, and that counties received funding school districts in Montgomery County received money directly from the county. It was their allocation, which then they shared a portion of with all the school districts. The total awarded stimulus funding for the district was $2,442,585. And again, like I said, it was issued in multiple different grants with multiple different end dates. The county funding and the PCCB1 needed to be spent within months of receiving the funding. PCCB2 and the 3 ESSER allocations can be spent over multiple years. ESSER 3 is out through September 2024. So the eligible uses for ESSER funding is fairly broad, but it must meet this 3-part test here. Funding must be used to prevent, prepare for, or respond to COVID-19 pandemic, including its impact on social, emotional, mental health, and academic needs for students. It must fall under one of the authorized uses of ESSER, which is the next slide, and the use of funds must be permissible under uniform administrative requirements. And basically what that means is that deals with federal purchasing requirements, contract language, vendor evaluation, and single audit requirements. So we already follow all of the requirements with our federal funds that we receive. So this is, these are the detail around the ESSER grants and the eligible use of funding. And you can see ESSER 1 is a broad range of options, which are focused, and I'll say this over and over again because this was the basis of ESSER funding, preventing, preparing for, and responding to COVID-19. It's sort of the baseline of the use of funding. ESSER 2 is the same as ESSER 1, except it adds addressing learning loss and the ability to complete school facility and repairs and improvements focused on improving air quality. And then ESSER 3 is the same as 1 and 2 and adds a few more options. In addition to these funding sources, the state of Pennsylvania also allocated a portion of its COVID funding to school districts through the state budget for this year. Upper Dublin specifically is receiving $86,704 from the state, and the state funding comes with additional specific requirements for spending that funding. Learning loss is broken, so the breakdown is learning loss $61,000, and that $61,000 is further broken down with a target 30% for social, emotional, mental health needs of students, target 10% for professional development for staff in social, emotional, and mental health needs of students, and target 8% for reading remediation and improvement. We have to set aside approximately $12,000 for summer enrichment programs and $12,000 for after-school programs. So it has been our goal all along to develop a careful and sustainable plan to use this one-time funding to avoid the fiscal challenges that ARA funding created in the late 2000s. If anyone remembers the mortgage and banking crisis, so many school districts used ARA funding to bring recurring expenses on, and that left a giant hole or cliff when the funding ran out. We've been careful to avoid that in this planning process. So ESSER 1, 2, and 3 and PCCD 2 allow for this planning process to develop because they're over multiple years. If you remember back at the beginning of COVID, immediately our team developed a plan to transition to a blended learning model, and this required funding from PCCD 1 and Montgomery County. We implemented instructional technology, software, specific facility needs for cleaning and structuring our facilities for spacing, and that was done immediately. After the immediate needs were addressed, we opened in November of 2020, we focused our attention on longer-term planning, teaching and learning loss and student social and emotional wellness, facility needs, HVAC, air quality improvement as supported by our facility condition assessment. And we also completed a district-wide stakeholder survey as required for the ARP funding, and planning to avoid long-term recurring expenses that are not sustainable. So again, I know these slides are small, but everyone has access to this online. Stakeholder engagement is a required step in ESSER 3 ARP funding. To accomplish this, we released a survey to request feedback on the key areas that the stimulus funding was meant to address. That survey received 1,127 responses across a wide range of stakeholders, which we were extremely happy about. This is a summary of the survey results, and the results show that the top 2 items were to address necessary HVAC facility updates and improve indoor air quality and support social and emotional wellness for our students. Other 2 receiving the next highest responses were support teacher and staff development, update classroom curriculum and instructional practices, and support technology systems, improve infrastructure, and increase connectivity. So what you have here is our high-level plan to appropriate the stimulus funding by fund type. You can see ESSER 1 and PCCD 2 need to be spent by September of 2022, and we're focusing those funding sources on more day-to-day instructional and student support needs, including instructional technologies and supplies, supporting Cardinal Academy costs, nursing services, and building substitutes, and I'll talk a little bit more about that. ESSER 2 and 3, we're looking to focus much of that funding on HVAC upgrades and indoor air quality improvements for our 3 older elementary schools. And that funding will only be a portion of the cost to complete these building improvements. The proposed work is directly in line with the results of the facility condition assessment. In building substitutes, we strongly believe that funding additional building substitutes continues to help address the current sub-shortage, which most everyone is aware of. And this is not the full answer, but the more subs we have assigned in buildings, the more assurance there is that students are receiving all of the necessary supports that we should be delivering. ESSER 3 also comes with mandatory requirements to set aside 20% of the total funding allocation specifically to address learning loss. And our plan for this set aside is to maintain our contracted social worker that we currently have in place this year, and continue to support instructional technology, and also to fund building substitutes. Building substitutes are an expensive proposition. Again, we have 3 buildings right now in many areas, or are working towards having 3 in buildings. So we believe that's continued need to support moving forward. And then the state allocations you can see here, you can see some overlap across funding sources, which is certainly allowable. This was a little more challenging in that $86,000, I don't want to make it seem like an insignificant amount of money, but to break it down into 6 different chunks, like we were required to do, did require some strategy. So we're definitely looking to address learning loss. With a portion of that is with the social worker to satisfy 30% set aside for social and emotional well-being of students, working on appropriate staff PD for upcoming professional learning days, and instructional technology to address reading remediation and improvement. And we are also in the process of developing summer enrichment programs focused on STEM and after-school programs are in development to provide support for students and family engagement with a focus on literacy improvement. Lastly, there's also an additional funding source for IDEA. So ARP also set aside money specifically for to supplement the provision of special education and related services for eligible school-age children. We do have an allocation of $160,000 for IDEA, which flows through the Montgomery County Intermediate Unit. And this is a plan that we are continuing to build out at the moment, so we can certainly share more information about that in the near future. So again, that was our plan for ESSER and stimulus funding in general. And I'll certainly do my best to answer questions, and we also have other members of our instructional team here to answer questions as well.
All right, comments or questions? Everyone loves it. A teaching.
Yeah, the contracted social worker, you're saying that that's, you want to avoid the long-term impact on the budget. So do you see that contracted social worker as somebody or a position that will go away, or is that going to be in the next year's budget personnel or following years into personnel?
We contracted with that social worker specifically for this year to bring, as we were bringing students back. We're looking at the role of the 2 other social workers in our district and the role of our school counselors. So we are going to be doing some delegation of duties and realigning some things. If that social worker, if we deem that we need that 3rd social worker, that will come back through the budgetary process. But at this time, it's not planned for next year's budget.
Anyone else? So I observe, if I look back at the survey results, if we skip that a few slides there, at the very bottom of that list are some after-school literature programs, before and after-school literature programs, and summer literature programs, which were one of the categories that we're required to spend some of those dollars on, which are viewed by survey respondents as comparatively low priority. Does the administration agree that those are low priority? Are we required to do those things, or do we not, or by spending that little amount of money that's allocated in there, are we setting ourselves up to have to continue to spend money on these relatively low priority?
No, so by spending the money that we're required to to spend on those. I don't think we're setting ourselves up for anything. We are talking with the Upper Dublin Education Foundation and some private donors to do some things, particularly at the middle school moving forward. But I was a little bit surprised that before and after school programs were so low on the priority list after looking at all of the results. But I think that is also a function of the fact that we've not had a ton of before and after school programs that are district run.
Yeah, that makes sense. And regarding the other priorities in this list, for example, the fourth one is to support technology systems, improve infrastructure, and increase connectivity. Did I miss them? I don't see those in the spending plan. Certainly not, at least in that language.
You won't see it specifically in this spending plan because we're actually achieving that through our district operating budget.
Okay.
While the state said that you had to get stakeholder input for this plan, right, yeah, no, and that's something that districts are talking about because our results are not very different from some of the other districts or other superintendents that we've been talking to. And so we've been looking at what we're able to achieve inside our general fund budget and then what are some things that we aren't able to necessarily achieve. And that's, for us, luckily, it came up in two areas that we wouldn't be able to necessarily do inside our general fund.
It is interesting to me that those things do show up as high priorities for survey respondents. It just gives us a piece of feedback on whether that's spent through stimulus funds or our own budget. Those are things that people think we ought to work on. So useful information.
And in our News from the Nest newsletter that will go out next week, several of those priorities that aren't part of this funding plan will be addressed in there and how we are addressing those, because there were still a number of things that came out of that survey that I think are of interest to the community, so we can move that.
Yeah, they can go into the strategic plan.
Yeah. Okay, any other comments on this item? Karen?
Quick question about the use of the social worker. So what's the thought there? Is the social worker going to be developing programming for kids that they're going to be kind of rolling out, going into classrooms, or is it more of a, if you need help, you come to them? And just trying to get a sense of how many kids that are resources reach.
It's more individualized. It's for kids that were elementary kids that were specifically having some trouble transitioning back to in-person learning. The social worker is also working with classroom teachers to build some capacity, and also throughout the rest of the year, we'll be doing some professional learning to build capacity of our staff. I would say that social worker is probably impacting 50 students directly.
Yeah, just a quick question. All these different funds, the administration of that, how much time does that take from your department? I mean, it's nice to get a lot of this money, but also the administration of it is a fair amount of time and energy. And how does that impact your department?
So I'll start by saying we're certainly appreciative of all the funding. I think it does good things. It is extremely time-consuming to manage grant-related funding, especially federal grant-related funding, and it's not just my department, it's the curriculum department. So, Mr. Hoffman and Ms. Penner do a phenomenal amount, spend a phenomenal amount of time working through this with us. So it's a pretty significant amount of time.
Yeah, no, and I just don't want it to go unmentioned. I think on behalf of the district, we are very grateful for all this extra work that's being done.
Any other comments? So as I understand it, this is a requirement of the ESSER funds for us to develop this plan, so we have board action to approve this, is that correct? Or is it not the plan?
I'm not aware that the board has to actually approve the plan. This is really just a draft. I mean, this is a working document, so if there's any substantial changes, we bring it back before the board to discuss, but I don't believe there's formal approval required. We have a requirement to develop the plan and post it online and make it available in a language-friendly format for anyone that wants to review it.
Okay, so no board action required on this item. We can move on to item G, which is the plan transfer to capital reserve.
Yeah, so the plan transfer to capital reserve is a recommendation to transfer 1.9 million from our general fund to the capital reserve fund. This type of transfer does require formal board approval before it's completed. So there are two primary reasons for this recommendation. One I already mentioned tonight, so we have this approved as part of our current year budget, the 21-22 budget. And again, if you remember back in early 2021, the board issued new debt for our middle school construction project. But we also refinanced other issues at historically low interest rates. And through that process last year, we achieved almost the lowest of low rates, which generated about $1.9 million in one-time savings that were going to be realized in the current 21-22 fiscal year. Since this was only one-time savings, the board did prudently authorize a plan to set aside this one-time savings to transfer the capital reserve in this current year budget for future capital project needs. So that not only put us in a positive position in the development of the 22-23 budget, but also in funding critical facility-related capital projects as were identified in the facility condition assessment. So capital reserve fund, I'll just do a quick background here. So just a quick overview. This is a fund that can be used for when we transfer the 1.9 million. That fund can be used for capital projects, capital improvements, purchase of school buses, or the construction of new buildings and debt service related to those projects. A transfer to the capital reserve fund is a one-way trip, I like to say. So once it goes in there, it cannot come back to the general fund. And while I would probably never recommend this unless we were in the most dire situations, the flexibility that you have there is that you could use funding in the capital reserve fund to pay debt service payments, which are right now budgeted in our general fund. So it does allow you some flexibility, but we certainly would only want to use that in sort of the worst of circumstances. So the recommendation is to make that transfer at this point of 1.9 million to our capital reserve.
Comments or questions? Andy?
So your document here references next 5 years. From when?
So when it would be from basically whenever we start doing projects, but I think that was when would have been the beginning of this fiscal year, absent the storm damage occurring. So when the ICS put the plan together, it was a 10-year plan. There was really no start date, but I would definitely say July 1st of 2021.
Actually, I would, and just to follow on that, I think the plan may be too strong a word. It was a recommendation to address those items with $30 million appearing in the first 5 years of their 10-year window.
I'm just saying, if I'm somebody on the outside looking in, and I keep talking about the next 5 years, I want to know what the period of 5 years is that we're saving, or we're trying to put aside $30 million for. Because we've got, after this, you said we've got $10 million put aside. Okay, so that's a third, but the question is how much ground do we have to cover and how many years? So if you're talking 4 years, you need $20 million. You're talking an average of $4 million, or $5 million a year. But if you're talking 5 years, well, then that's $4 million. So that to me is just something I'm confused about.
It's a fair question, and I think when we started talking about the funding plan, which it still needs to be fully developed for these 5-year capital projects, I'm not sure it's possible to fund that all with cash, right? I think it'll have to be a comprehensive plan. Some of it potentially we would want to use cash. Some of it might need to be debt service. So that some of it. With the ESSER funding, we have about $1 million available in ESSER funding that could be used for the capital plan. So I think it's a multifaceted plan that still needs to be fully developed and approved by this committee on the board.
And over that time, certainly some of that may be deferred or combine your, depending on the order you do it and the cost of those times, things may change. So plan, that's why I say plan is a little bit of a strong word, but it's a target, 30 million, there's $30 million if everything is done properly, we want to fund within 5 years. And this isn't enough, I think you should point out, to get to $30 million in 5 years, but this is the planned part, and what often happens at the end of a budget year is we see what surplus we may have, and more may get transferred at that point. Any other, gentlemen?
Andy, what's the timing like on putting together that, let's call it at this point, a 5-year plan for what we are going to target over, again, whatever the start date is, right? What we are going to focus on first?
So I don't know that I have a specific answer to that, but I think it's within the next few months to bring a recommendation back to this committee, right? So I want to say we were probably ready to roll out a presentation when the storm hit in September, and that sort of changed what we've been focused on working on. So I don't want to blame the storm on that, but I think it's relatively soon, within the next few months, for sure.
I think that's a valid point. I think one of the things that I want to stress, not so much to everyone sitting in this room, but people that might be listening, the tornado was no insignificant event. And so that really has taken the focus, and it's diverted the focus away from, as Andy said, putting together that 5-year plan. And it's by no means an excuse, but it shows that when things happen, we have to be nimble enough to shift our focus. And then once we get the lion's share of the work related to the tornado done, we can then put all of our energy and all of our attention and focus back to developing that plan.
And I'll add to that, as we've discussed earlier tonight, the tornado also presents opportunities related to this money that now may be a better time than we would have otherwise have had to do some of the work at Warren Elementary School, and may change the dollar figures required for that work as well. So you never want that to happen, but it actually can be viewed as an opportunity in some ways. Any other comments or questions on this transfer? All right, so members of the committee, are we prepared to move this forward, this recommendation forward to the legislators?
Yes.
Yeah.
All right, thank you. We have the Eastern budget for 22-23.
Yeah, so each year, member school districts are required to take action on the budget for Eastern Center for Arts and Technology. So Eastern reviews and receives approval on their budget from member district superintendents and its joint operating committee, which Dr. Levinowitz is a member of, president of the operating committee. So certainly Dr. Levinowitz can assist if there's any questions tonight, or we can follow up with Dr. Wisnarski and if there's any questions we're not able to answer. So after that approval, it goes to all the member school boards for review and approval as well. So I included all the information they provided in this packet as well, and I'm just going to hit the key highlights and then see if there's any questions. So after 2 years of completing an operating budget that called for 0% increase in district contributions, so they have more revenues than just what each member district needs in. They receive state revenues and federal revenues. The Eastern budget was developed with a 2% increase. Their operating expenses are divided among participating school districts in the same proportion as the average daily membership of students enrolled there. So page 21 and 22 in the Eastern budget packet explains that calculation. Upper Dublin's allocation is $516,325, which is an increase of almost $49,000 or 10.5%. And while that may seem like a lot on the surface, it's consistent with the average ADM increase of 5 students or 14%. So our current total year enrollment is 50, and the 3-year average is 41. In addition to the operating budget, Eastern is continuing its plan to fund a 10-year capital plan to maintain its facilities. Funding of a capital plan was something new that was introduced as part of their 2021 budget. And page 23 in their packet of the budget provides all the details on that. The current 21-22 budget requested $550,000 spread across the 9-member districts, and our portion was a little over $105,000. And in order to continue funding its $12.5 million 10-year capital plan, the Eastern requires a contribution of $1,040,000 from member districts. And in order to provide relief, Eastern again transferred $250,000 of its surplus from the 2021 operating fund to help bring down that request to $790,000. So Upper Dublin's portion is $156,678, or an increase of about $50,000. The capital contribution is based strictly on step value, which is connected to the value of real estate in each district. So even if we had enrollment of 0, we would still be required to pay that portion of the bill to Eastern. So the proposed budget for 21-22 projects our costs at $656,402 as compared to $572,560, or an $84,000 increase. This increase, it's important to note, was already known when I developed the preliminary budget, so it's already built into the budget that this committee and the board saw last month.
Before we go to questions, Art, I just, can you talk about whether or how well so a couple of years ago, as Anna said, Eastern changed the way allocations are divvied up in order to fund their capital plan. How is that going?
Well, a couple of years ago, after looking at the Articles of Jointure, that is the guidelines that we have to follow at Eastern, we realized that it would be more appropriate to fund the capital reserve based on step values and a separate amount of money, separate source of funds. So the challenge that Eastern has too is in terms of funding capital, significant capital improvements, it's very difficult for us to do bonds. So we're looking at the costs over 10 years at Eastern, and we came up with a figure, and we've been passing those expenses over to the districts as a separate charge every year. Also looking very carefully at our fund balance, as Andy so well articulated, that in the past few years we've reduced the actual allocation to the district. This year I think it was 250. And again, I'm encouraging Eastern to look at it again next year to see if we can do that going out into the future. It was very timely because we were able to do a 0% increase, as Andy stated, over the past few years. It's a slightly higher increase because of the 2% that's going to the budget for secondary education at Eastern, and also the capital projects. I think when some of you visit Eastern on February 27th, I think is our open house. You'll be invited, especially the new board members and those that have not been able to visit Eastern yet. You'll see the significant capital improvements that we've been doing over the past few years. We've added the robotics program. That's a brand new classroom that we built. Next year, we're doing exercise science program, exercise science and rehabilitation program. We're building a new classroom for that. And part of it is bringing more students to Eastern. And as I'm so proud to say that we finally hit the 50 student mark at Upper Dublin. Still a low percentage compared to the other districts, but we are getting better. And I think one of the objects is when we start talking about the schedule for next year, potential schedule for next year, it might be a better opportunity for the students to attend Eastern, especially with the new programs that we have. I think robotics is a really wonderful program. It's a beautiful space, and we still have openings in that program. Numbers are better, but kids haven't really seen that space yet as much. So I think it's really trying to keep our increases as low as possible. This year is 2%, and then the additional capital assessment to all the districts, even Grand Rapids, that does not send any students. They are assessed, and they actually do. I think they do send us a check.
So the capital fund is growing at the expected rate, it's, that's all.
It is, yeah, it is. And we continue to look at it, continue to look at those estimated costs over 10 years. And one of the advantages that current technical centers have is they can do a lot of the work themselves. I think when you visit, you'll be, where most of the work in that new exercise science and rehab program, our students are doing a lot of the work. We're doing a lot of electrical, we do a lot of the demolition, and so there's a great savings that we didn't really estimate when we looked at the costs. So each year we'll be looking at what else needs to be done and reassessing the 10-year capital project budget.
All right, so comments or questions on the Eastern budget? Yeah.
One thing that stood out to me is we appear to have the largest percentage change in our portion of the budget. Is that just, you mentioned earlier, kind of correlates to our increase in enrollment? Is that, it just happens to be we have the largest percentage increase in enrollment?
I certainly didn't evaluate it against all the other districts, but it is very much in line with our increase in enrollment. So I think that makes sense. Again, as increases and decreases happen by district, it moves around. So ours, it's proportionate to our increase in ADUs enrollment.
And that's a good problem to have, right? I believe we ought to get our numbers up. So this was a step in the right direction.
I concur too. I think this is a fantastic program and great investment.
You too.
Is Eastern also eligible to ask for grants and things like that, or is that because of their structure that is some sort of by member school districts?
I don't believe they have ESSER money because they're primarily funded by all of us.
No, that's what I
Eastern not getting ESSER funds, but there were some other federal and state grants that did come in, took advantage of it. So again, a lot of the HVAC in the building modified, and some minor construction throughout the building, and it's spacing, all that we have. We did welcome bundles when the kids came back, which included an Easter mask, hand sanitizer, and some other guidelines for them to follow at Easter. So imagine how difficult it is to deliver a program where students do work very close together. So we still maintain at least 3 feet of distance. We've been doing very well. Most recently, there's a lot more challenges in terms of positive cases in all of our districts.
Any other comments or questions on Eastern? All right, so members of the committee will move that forward to the next meeting?
Yes.
Yes.
I say yes. We have a consultant for the Connections program.
Each year, Melanie Butler coordinates the Connections program, primarily for our Black and African American students at the high school. This year, she's expanding that to include middle school students. This is a part of our equity work, our equity and empowerment work. Typically, this contract would have come through the Education Committee, but given that there's an increased cost over last year, we brought it to Finance. We are going to be taking care of this. Funds are budgeted for this. The reintroduction of Connections at the middle school is particularly exciting. It had been at the middle school for years. It sort of waned and left the middle school, but it will be great to have a systemic program 6 through 12.
What was the budget number for this last fiscal year?
I believe in the past it was between $10,000 and $11,000.
Okay.
I don't know the answer.
If that's the ballpark, that's to include 3 or 4 grades from the building for that relatively comparatively small increase would be, sounds quite reasonable. Any other comments or questions? Jen?
Melanie does a great job with the students and really gets the best out of them, like the best she can, and I'm so happy to see it back in the
Teacher.
So is the program accessible for all middle school students or only?
It'll be accessible to all students.
Anyone else? Okay, so members will move that one forward.
Yes.
All right, thank you. And so we are through our reports of recommendation for our community input. If anyone here would like to speak. Okay, we do have several, I think 8 comments that were submitted online ahead of time. And because they are numerous and long, Andy and I are going to take turns, so you won't have to hear one of us going on. Rather long mistakes. While I pull up, you want to take the first one?
Certainly. So the first comment is from Leslie D. Martiel, Fort Washington. I have 2 high school swimmers that are being greatly affected by the slow repair time of the natatorium. Our kids are still swimming outside and the temperatures are beginning to drop and will continue to do so over the next 3 months, the rest of their season. I don't understand why repairs took so long to begin and why things aren't being done around the clock to open the facility back up again. The Upper Dublin swim team is the district's most successful team in history, with the girls winning 31 straight Suburban 1 titles and the boys winning 26 straight, as well as a state title in recent years. We aren't being told what's still to do, but what is the head of facilities doing to make the pool a priority? Is he making sure that we have electricians on standby so that when lights arrive, they can be installed? Has the pool been cleaned yet? Do we have a water company lined up to fill the pool when the time comes so that we don't have to wait an additional week or more for the pool to be filled? There are companies that can deliver tanker trucks full of pre-treated water. Has he reached out? Our kids need us to do all we can to get back to normal and back inside. This district needs to put the kids first. They have been so resilient over the last 2 years, but even more so the last 3 months. Do right by these kids and get them swimming inside this winter.
All right, the next comment is from Jimmy Patella from Ambler. The pool. Since in a student population of 4,000, there are only 60 swimmers, let me try to explain the detrimental effect it is not having access to our own pool. No 2-a-days. Therefore, we are missing out on at least an hour and a half of practice each day and can't train properly. Swimming outside, temperatures are freezing. Daily travel for students who need transportation. Limited hours and no blocks to practice starts and release. Limited pool time and space. All away meets. Part of the reason I'm sending this public comment, ironically, is we are at an away meet that was supposed to be a home meet that's 45 minutes away. Not only are we losing home field advantage, the kids must be dismissed even earlier and miss 2 classes instead of 1. We are also unable to host the Cardinal Classic, a UDSD swimming tradition. The emotional, mental, and physical impact of not having access to our own pool is not calculable, but is a real and vital issue. Swimming is a grueling and difficult sport that can be won or lost by hundredths of a second. Every advantage, extra swimming, proper training, sleep, and tapering makes a difference. UDHS is a strong, historically elite swimming program. UDHS girls have won Suburban 1 champs for over 30 years, and the boys just under 30 years. These swimmers have earned and deserve our full attention and journalism. Questions? Who is the general contractor, or who is in charge of getting the pool back in working and usable order? What has been done? Roof is on. Is the pool empty? Is it clean? Is the heater installed? What are we waiting for? Why? Supply chain issues are no longer an excuse. It's been almost 4 months. How long does it take to fill the pool? I've heard from staff that it takes over 2 weeks because of the annual water pressure. Have we used UDAD and UDHS boosters, parents and coaches for advice or ideas? These groups are an untapped resource that UDSD has not used for years. The district has had a problem running and caring for this facility since it was built. They are real experts that can be used for that expertise and outside-the-box thinking. Example, we know of tanker trucks that provide pre-treated water that can be ready to go with 3 days notice. We've been patient and understanding during water polo and the fall training season, but the kids have been through enough, coming off the COVID season and now this. Please reassure the kids and parents that this is a priority. We are putting all known resources to this project, and that we're doing all we can until we can't do anymore, that we're not waiting for one step to finish before we start planning the next step. We will stop making excuses and start being proactive and get this team and these kids back to their home. When there is a will, there's a way. For the kids, we can and we should.
The next comment is from Robert Snell Drescher. Please prioritize repair of the UDHS pool. Our swimmers are practicing outdoors, the weather is worse in January and February. For the well-being of our swimmers, and we have a record number of student athletes, fixing the high school pool is important. Thanks.
Next comment is from John Herzog from England. Thank you for allowing me to address the board regarding concern with UD swimming dive team. I'm sure none of us can truly understand the monster undertaking the school board and township has been put through from the impacts of the tornado. I'm sure the board is doing what is possible to get the students back into classrooms and to return all athletic teams to some sort of sense of normal. I would like to first thank you for your tireless efforts and commitment. I do have some questions regarding the progress of the Upper High School pool. I certainly don't know all the details regarding the delays, and I'm not sure if they've been publicly shared. I can certainly speak on behalf of the swimming dive parents, but our number one concern is the safety and well-being of our children. And with that said, entering into extreme colder temperatures outside, and Sparta's lack of adequate ventilation for indoor pool air quality. The teacher is uncertain with the timing of returning to the Upper High School pool. Have all options been explored with other indoor facilities that are adequately sized and vented for today's health and well-being for our children? I'm confident that this board is doing whatever is possible to apply pressure to the general contractor or subcontractor performing the work, and activities required to bring the pool up to code and life safety in a timely manner for our children. My career is in real estate development, and I build large-scale buildings with indoor and outdoor pools, so I completely understand the impacts in today's supply chain challenges navigating through this uncharted waters. If I could help in any possible way, please don't hesitate to reach out. Thanks again for your time and understanding of our concerns.
The next comment is from Hallie Herzog, Maple Glen. I understand that the pool is not a top priority in the district, but these kids are suffering greatly and without complaining or questioning. It is not about home weeks or even about having a home pool. It is about swimming outside in below freezing conditions for 2 years and getting out of the pool, naked, wet, and into sub-freezing weather, and doing it without hesitation or question for what they love. It's about not being able to get warm for hours, being pale white, purple, and getting it done without question. It's about them assuming the district is working as hard as they can for them behind the scenes, while they push forward to be their best selves without question and with trust. It's about swimming in less than ideal indoor conditions for shorter practices, just hoping to hold on to what conditioning they have left for what they want. It's about 30 years of suburban championships that this sport has provided Upper Dublin that is in jeopardy. It's about kids working their entire childhood for college scholarships that are being put in jeopardy because they cannot train properly in poor indoor conditions, shorter practices, in below freezing conditions, and not even hesitating because of their love for the sport and desire for excellence. It's about these young adults doing everything they have been asked of them and more to keep winning. Excelling personally, being amazing people, athletes, and future leaders. These young adults are taught to train to be nothing but excellent in and outside of the pool, and assume that those who surround them and support them want and expect the same for them and will move mountains to help them. Swimming is a sport like no other. They cannot have practices, days off, or a season without top training and be expected to win, be recruited, and have a body to perform like it needs to in the pool. While we were thankful to continue training with temporary alternatives and understand that other indoor options have been exhausted, although it sounds like the Y is a possibility with lifeguards. These kids cannot come back in January to just be given construction excuses and everything they continue to put on the line. I want to know that every option has been exhausted to get our pool up and running because this is what our children deserve.
Next comment is from Francis Graham from Fort Washington. Good evening. I would like to address the increased disparities that are affecting the over 500 children who attend Fort Washington Elementary School. I am concerned that it seems that everything is back to business as usual. These kids are still reeling from significant trauma, whether expressed or not. I've broken down into 3 buckets. School time. Students have already missed a lot of time compared to their peers. In September, they had 4 days of about 3 hours of virtual instruction and 4 days of about an hour of virtual instruction, where the other schools have full days. Daily, they are missing out because of late bus arrivals. Their day minimally begins at 9:40 and 9:50 to accommodate for late bus arrivals. Is there a plan in place to run? When or if they return to Fort Washington Elementary School, I hope there will be no more virtual days. Extracurricular. We've only heard of what Fort Washington doesn't have, which is usually offered through the school. Reading Olympics only by Zoom, no math Olympics, no band concert. The other schools would have them. No garden club, no chorus or concert. No after-school activities / sports run by PTAs. These not only are academic for kids, it creates friends and community. The Fort children listen to announcements at their respective schools that do not apply to them. And social. They are not sharing a sense of community or belonging, and while the other schools have tried to welcome, it appears to be business as usual at each school with no coordinated efforts to include the Fort kids. Some kids are struggling, some are fine. These issues are not easy for them to communicate, so we don't really know. I do know we're missing an awful lot of what makes being a kid in Fort so special. Who's coordinating the effort to bridge these disparities? Additional efforts are necessary to help the teachers and principal of Fort Washington Elementary School. What can we do as a community to assist? Parents are willing to pitch in, but need some direction. As a leadership team, it would be helpful if these issues can be addressed. Upper Dublin has outstanding academic leadership, which is always on the forefront of new investment and pedagogical practices. Can this exemplary energy be geared towards looking into solutions? Can the members of the admin be a part of and lead a special task force dedicated to coming up with solutions? More trips to Robbins Park or other activities geared to building them up and feel excited about them. In a separate bucket is communication. Fort Washington parents wait every week for information on what is happening with the school. Parents have rearranged jobs, schedules, and transportation to help shuffle our children, and that's okay, it's what we do. Every week we're told information is coming. Last update indicated we were waiting on info back from the township. Who? Where is the great organization? We have all had a lot of unsettled news and can handle whatever moves. We are aware of the material shortages. The significance of all of the over 500 student relocations seems to be minimalized and is barely acknowledged in the weekly updates. We're not asking for a full schedule, but the courtesy of what is happening with frequency. We know this has been a really hard, stressful time, and as a community, we're pulling together to try and do it. As a leadership team who has not lost how hard it is to pivot under such duress, and all of your efforts are appreciated, we would appreciate to be looped in with them. Finally, please do not use this opportunity to make a new and improved story. Just please focus on getting the 500 plus kids back into the building. Now is not the time to do extra improvements. We need to not be in small classrooms anymore or spending so much time traveling back and forth to school and missing on instructional time.
Next comment is from Kate McManus Drescher. I'm writing on behalf of the swim and diving team members and parents as the president of the UDHS Swim and Dive District. I would like to express our concerns and extreme frustration regarding the pace of the completion of the Upper Dublin High School natatorium and locker room repairs. We have had the opportunity to discuss the state of the natatorium with Mr. Highland and Mr. Schultz, starting on November 19th, and while I greatly appreciate their responsiveness and efforts to keep our coaches and parents updated on the progress, it is clear that as they are not in charge of facilities and the physical plan of UDSD, they have limited control over the situation. That is why I'm writing to you now. As you are aware, the UDHS swim and dive team is now in their 4th week of the winter swim season, and 14 weeks have passed since the tornado damaged the natatorium roof. Our athletes have been forced to alternatively practice with small groups, either in an outdoor pool or a 4-lane pool at a fitness center. This practice situation is not conducive to the health and well-being of these athletes, nor is it allowing them to optimize their performance for the season, nor promote their usual team cohesiveness. As the weeks have passed, the team's competition season has now been affected as well. Our annual Cardinal Classic Invitational meet was scheduled for this Saturday, December 18th, and typically includes 15 to 20 teams from across Eastern PA. This meet is an annual tradition which gives our athletes a great opportunity for fast swims, great competition, and generates significant revenue for the team, but has been canceled due to a lack of facility. We have also had to move our scheduled home meet tomorrow to Council Rock Park, which will result in dozens of lost opportunities for our athletes to compete due to the smaller pool size at Council Rock versus our 10-lane pool. And the remainder of December's training will continue in the current undesirable situation. The parents and athletes are extremely concerned with the pace of repairs and are very frustrated by the prospect of starting January with no facility available to the team. Our athletes will be returning from an intensive training trip on December 31st. In order to optimize their training and propel their success this season, they will need to train in their own facility in January, which is only 19 days away from today. It also includes the Christmas and New Year holidays. The month of January also includes the bulk of the team's competition. The inability to host meets at our own pool hampers our athletes' opportunity to compete and puts them at a competitive disadvantage, not to mention costs the team considerable funds and lost snack bar revenue. The Upper Dublin High School swim and dive team has a long history of excellence. They have won 31 consecutive Suburban 1 League championship titles and are regular PIAA District 1 and PIAA State Championship success. The girls' team was the 2020 PIAA AAA State Champion, and Pat Reddican, our longtime girls head coach, was named to the 2020 PIAA Coach of the Year. Our teams regularly produce elite divisional collegiate swimmers and divers, including a number of athletes on our current team. Our boys and girls team consists of 65 plus highly dedicated athletes training up to 20 hours per week, and they deserve their school and district administration to treat this matter with urgency. We ask you to please consider all available options to expedite the filling, heating, and chemical balance of the pool, as well as the completion of additional repairs required to allow our athletes to fully utilize their own facility by January 3rd, 2022 at the latest. One option to expedite the process of filling the pool would be having an outside service that has ability to fill our pool in 24 hours. This would allow for expedited temperature and chemical control of the water rather than the typical 5 to 7 day process to fill our pool. The head swim coach, Brandon Pierce, had researched this option through Aqueduct Water Transport. There's a link to the website. I know Brandon would be happy to share this information he has gathered. Thank you very much for your time and attention. If the swim and dive team boosters can be of any assistance, please don't hesitate to reach out to me.
The next comment and final comment is from Julian Waldron, Fort Washington. Thank you to the board and committee for the Herculean efforts made so far to get the schools up and running. I ask that the district continue to push the pool repair forward as quickly as possible. Like so many others, my family knows firsthand that dealing with tornado cleanup, remediation, insurance claims, estimates, adjustments, structural repairs, and supply chain issues is not easy. But we also know firsthand that the UDHS water polo team boosters, UDAC, and the UDHS swim and dive team are three of the strongest groups in our community. Each has been amazingly generous in helping our family recover, and we are by no means the only beneficiaries. These groups provided invaluable service and set a great example for the kids in our community. In addition, before the tornado, swimming was a bright spot throughout the pandemic. Due to countless hours these pool users spent making sure the public had safe access to safe and healthy exercise. The groups that use our UDHS pool make the district and us proud. Out of respect for the efforts of these groups post-tornado and throughout the pandemic, I ask the district to do everything possible to bring our pool back. So that concludes our community input. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
Sorry.
Go ahead. I'm sorry. I told you.
I know how many you have.
That's it. Go ahead. Your turn.
My name is Caitlin Johnson. I live in Ambler, and I'm actually here more so on behalf of one of my neighbors. She is an elderly woman who is beautiful and witty and funny and has lived here for decades and didn't have any children in the district. She's fighting cancer, and she's just one of the stories of the many fabulous people in Upper Dublin who are hoping that you make really wise decisions about how you spend your money and about raising taxes or not raising taxes. And with COVID and with people still recovering from this tornado and just from people who have everyday struggles that live in the neighborhood who are hoping that you don't raise taxes very high if at all possible, and that you really consider what's going on this year, especially with how we spend our money. And I know we have so many great and fabulous projects and so many things that we want to do that will be extremely wonderful for my kids, everybody's kids. It's just a reminder that when you look at all these numbers and you're talking about, oh, there's going to be more people, more homes, there's people's lives, and there's other people who've been here for decades that really want to be able to stay in their homes. And I'm hoping that we can find a way to still improve and become a great township that I've grown up with, that I love, and that we'll still be able to keep the older people here who are funny and witty and beautiful and give so much to our community. And I also wanted to echo, not the pool, I mean, the pool is great, but the person who talked about for Washington, that it would be pretty awesome if there was a way to bring our community together a little bit more, because the Halloween parade was canceled and it was such a bummer. And we really just want a chance just to be together at some point. Not necessarily at the building, but just as a community to feel that they are still one. And I'm stubborn because I love Fort so much. I want my kids to go to Fort. And we have so many great schools and teachers, and we just want people we love about this town. It's pretty much our heart how much we care for each other. So thank you so much for all the hard work that you do, because I know this year is very challenging. And I just want to pass that to you guys.
All right, thank you. And with that, I will close the meeting input, and we'll see if there are comments from the administration of the board. Steve?
Thank you, Mr. Serrata. Before I get into the actual responses to some of what we heard tonight, I do want to pick out a few themes of what I heard, and I want to address those themes. One theme that I heard was the district needs to put kids first. On September 1st, we had a tornado. We have 55 families that are still displaced. We are helping families get transportation to and from school. We're making sure that kids are taken care of. We're making sure that staff is being taken care of. And so while I'm sure no one that wrote any of those comments means any offense, it is somewhat offensive to hear that we need to put kids first, because that's what we do each and every day. I also heard that we need to stop making excuses. I've not heard excuses from our leadership team or our school board. What I have heard is that we'll give substantive updates when we can provide substantive updates. As we talked about earlier in this meeting, there are a lot of unknowns. So you heard from our representative from ICS that they're hesitant to put a timeline on work because they're not sure, as the professionals whose job it is to do that, they're not sure that they can do that with any efficacy or accuracy. So I want to be clear that I don't think anyone is making excuses. What we are doing is trying to give people all the information that we have as we have it. So let's start with the pool. When we assessed the damage from the tornado, it was the recommendation of our insurance company and the construction management team not to do anything with the pool until the summer. Our leadership team at that point made the decision that that was not good enough, that we wanted to make sure that we would get kids back in the facility as quickly as possible. Our natatorium has a pitched roof, and the roof is completed with materials that cannot be worked on in extreme temperatures. There was a period of time that it took for the engineering to be done to make sure that we were putting kids back in, or eventually putting kids back into a situation, into the natatorium with a temporary roof safely. As we included in our weekly update today, the update that goes out each and every Tuesday, we were very specific about the different venues that our athletic director, Matt Highland, has collaborated with and coordinated with to determine if we could use any of those facilities. Water polo was mentioned. Water polo practice, I believe it started at 9 or 9:30 at night in another district's pool. Mr. Highland noted that that time frame became very taxing and wearing on the athletes. It has been suggested, not necessarily in the community input tonight, but in emails that I've received, that surely another district would allow us to use their pool. That is true, but they're going to allow us to use their pool after they've used their pool and any of their outside groups have used the pool. If you think of the way that our pool had been used, we had water polo, we had swimming and diving, we had UDAC, and then there was community swim. So if we had our pool open and another district wanted to use it. I don't know that we would be in a position that we would be able to open up our pool for normal practice times. There was a comment made that there are excuses about how we take care of the natatorium in the pool. Everyone knows in the township, or most people know in the township, that the water that we fill the pool with has high copper levels. And so it has to go through, the water goes through a filtration system to fill the pool, and that takes a little bit of extra time, or we have to add added chemicals to that. Again, that's not an excuse, it's just the reality of the pool getting filled. I want to let everyone know that the district has paid for athlete memberships at East Florida, which is LA Fitness. Lifetime Fitness was also contracted and originally gave us memberships. However, having 50 to 60 of our students show up at their pool was starting to displace some of their members, and understandably they said that they were no longer able to accommodate us. And that's not a slight against Lifetime, that's just some objective information. Again, it was said that the pool was not a top priority. So admittedly on September 2nd, it wasn't a top priority. The top priority was to get kids back in school. But to surmise that the pool is not a priority now is patently false. While 14 weeks may seem like it's been a long time, and I empathize with the swimmers and their families because I know it directly affects them. 14 weeks when we're dealing with insurance companies, construction management, and supply chain issues is not that long of a time. And again, we could have waited until the summer to do anything with the pool, but we didn't think that was prudent. We will continue to provide substantive updates on the pool as we have them. And I don't want anyone to misconstrue or to conflate my comments tonight with having a lack of empathy or a lack of respect for our swimmers. I know how hard our swimmers work. I know the dedication it takes. And as soon as we can get our kids back in our pool, absolutely do that, but we have to do it safely. And that's going to take some time. We'll hopefully be able to get swimmers back in the pool in January. That remains our goal, but again, we have to do it safely. Regarding Fort Washington, I think there needs to be an understanding of what falls in the purview of the building principal and what falls on the district's leadership team. I will be connecting with Mr. Mack tomorrow to push on him again to have some more cross-grade level collaboration so that students feel that sense of community. We all know how special Fort Washington is. It was said that it's business as usual. I don't think any one of us feels that it's business as usual, or that the return of students to Fort Washington isn't being prioritized. We had to move out of Fort Washington in 36 hours and put our students in 3 other elementary schools. We could have kept the building completely virtual until we could reoccupy the building. Our leadership team didn't feel that that was appropriate. I do assure you that things are, the return is being prioritized. It was mentioned that we have students in small classrooms. All of our grade level classrooms are in our other buildings, are in full-size classrooms. The only small classrooms that are being used are for small group instruction. We're currently waiting on determining when movers can be here to move teachers, Fort Washington teachers, some of Fort Washington teachers back to Fort Washington. Once we have that information, we'll be able to lay out a plan of how we'll help teachers vacate their rooms that they're in, make the move, and then reoccupy their spaces at Fort Washington. Regarding the bus arriving at Thomas Fitzwater late, the times are variable. Unfortunately, again, not to make an excuse, but we're dealing with a bus driver shortage. And so we have some bus drivers are running 3 routes in the morning, 3 routes in the afternoon. And so as we're transferring kids and we're getting kids to the school, we're doing that as quickly as we can safely. Again, I would encourage everyone to stay tuned to our weekly updates. There will be another one next week before we go home for winter break. I anticipate at that time being able to have some more concrete information. But unless we have concrete information to give, I'm not going to give information, because we all know that the minute you put a date out there and then it changes, then the next thing that we hear is that we're not being transparent. So we will put out concrete information as soon as we have concrete information to put out. I would suggest that everyone who has written to me over the last 24 hours about the pool, in addition to the responses they got from me, they should refer to the UD Strong update today, because there's a full and comprehensive update on the pool. Thank you.
All right, thank you. I also want to acknowledge the question about, or it wasn't a question, it was a comment or request on being prudent about how we spend money. And I do want to say, I think we've been, over the last several years, our tax increases have been lower than the median for the area. It's certainly a very high focus of ours. You know, I'm actually proud of getting our district in really strong financial position while keeping our tax increases low over the last several years. And I would certainly anticipate that will continue. You know, I think all the deals are moving in the right direction at the moment. So,
Mr. Sir, if I could, so I can only speak to the years that I've been here, but I want to echo something you've said. We've kept our tax increases below the Act 1 index. We've kept them below the median. The reason that we've shifted to zero-based budgeting and needs-based budgeting is so that all of our budget controllers, our building principals, our directors, and our supervisors know very clearly what's in their budget. You know, we came out early this year and asked the board to approve the opt-out resolution, which we're very thankful that you did. I think that's a sign and an indication to the community that we are not looking for a gargantuan tax increase. And behind the scenes, when Mr. Leckman and I are working with our budget controllers, we're pushing on them every single day not to avoid making purchases or not to avoid making expenditures, but to make sure that they know what they're spending their money on, and to make sure that we're getting value out of everything that we spend in terms of our budgetary resources.
all right, any other comments or questions or anything to say on the agenda?
So for what it's worth regarding the pool, I just want to share with the community, there are two of us on this board who have children who are swimmers. I'm one of them. So I understand it. It's a personal issue for me as well, beyond my obligation as a board member. So I very much share the frustration. My child complains 4 times a week in, practicing outside in December about the cold. I'm very sympathetic to it. I empathize with it. But my frustration is really more at the situation. The fact that we were hit with a tornado that ripped the roof off the natatorium. So, my frustration personally is not at all with the facilities team or with the administration. I'm appreciative of the fact that we did push back on the original recommendation to wait until the weather got warmer to put the permanent roof on, and that we're making do, hopefully, with the temporary roof, as long as we can get the temperature regulated. So, again, I just want to share, it's very much a personal issue for me as well, and I really do feel the frustration. But at least, from my seat, I do feel the district is doing everything it can. I do feel that it's being prioritized.
Anyone else? Andy?
I just want to speak to the issue of the supply chain, because I think that people are lax to forget that, we were dealing with a pandemic, and we still are for the past year plus, almost 2 years now, which had a significant impact on supply chain issues. And to have to deal with the effects of a tornado that came through this community and affected its residents and this district in the manner in which it did, superimposed something upon the pandemic and the supply chain issues, which I don't think many people ever envisioned that we would have to deal with. And so for where my money's worth, the fact of the matter is that the supply chain issues that exist are not going to disappear overnight. They may not disappear for years, as I understand it. And I think that to expect us to get past them, so to speak, in 4 months is an unrealistic expectation. I think that the district, in terms of dealing with its tornado effects, has pivoted for the students in their best interests at all times. As a parent of a child in West, I frankly was so impressed with the fact that the administration did not simply choose to go to a virtual model, that it on the fly figured out a way to put our children back in classrooms safely with their teachers, with their classes intact, to continue the educational process after only being in school for one single day. And as for the community member who spoke to us this evening in person, I would just like to tell you that I thought that your comments were very, very well founded, and I think that we always have to keep our eye on all the members of the community. And I think that we're going to do a good job of trying to make sure that we do spend your dollars efficiently, effectively, and that we keep our eye on that prize at all times.
I would like to clarify one comment that I made, because now that I'm replaying it in my head, I don't want it to get misconstrued. When I mentioned the fact that our leadership team is doing everything we can for kids, I was not responding in the fact that I was at all trivializing the concerns that have been brought forth, either about kids not being back at Fort Washington or that the pool wasn't opening or wasn't open yet. My point, just so that everyone is very clear, is that it's hard to hear as a leadership team being told that we're not doing things on behalf of kids and that we're making excuses when we have tried to provide as much information as we can. And I know it's frustrating that there aren't a lot of details, and I know it's frustrating because I get frustrated too. I would like nothing more than to have concrete plans and be able to say, here are dates definite when things are going to happen. So I don't want anyone out there that might be listening to think that I was at all trivializing the concerns that were expressed tonight.
Anyone else? All right, so with that, let me once again welcome Pitya and Jenna. Happy birthday, Brooke. Our next Finance Committee meeting will be Wednesday, January 26th, 2022, presumably right here, but keep your eye out for that, just in case. And with that, we are adjourned.